Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the first video in this year's Memorial May series. If you were here for Memorial May last year, I was living in Florida. We went around to all the historical markers in my town and I learned a lot about where I was from. But I'm living in North Carolina this year in May, and so I am going to dedicate this entire month to the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. I'm super excited for this series. I've been doing tons and tons of filming already for this series. But in today's video, I have come to Freedom Park. I've been here many times before on this channel. We're going to walk around the lake and we're going to have a talk about what the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence is. I should probably tell you I'm born and raised in North Carolina, very proud, very loyal North Carolinian, very patriotic person, and I believe in the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. I am not ashamed to admit that. I believe it was real. I believe it happened. I believe we were first in freedom. We have it on our license plate. I believe in the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, but I definitely understand why people way smarter than me think that this is a bunch of baloney, that this didn't happen, that this was written after the fact to make North Carolina look better than we really are. I understand why it's a controversy, but I personally believe in it. So I have dedicated this entire month from here till the end of May 31st to the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. We're going to be doing tons and tons of history videos this month. I'll let you know right now what to expect. Every single day between now and the end of the month, I have done a separate video for each and every person. There were 27 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to be going around town showing you as many sites as I can that are still standing. A lot of these people have been completely lost to time, but I'm going to dig up as much research on them as I can. And I'm going to dedicate one day for the rest of the month to each and every signer of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. Also, I will be attending multiple events happening in Charlotte in the month of May, filming them as I'm able to, depending on the rules at the events or, the people that are there. But I'm going to, at the very least, go to all these events, get pictures, get video if I can, and show you what a big deal it is to North Carolina that this happens to be the 250th anniversary. We're making a big deal out of it this year. There's going to be lots and lots happening in town. So for this month, you can just expect a whole bunch of Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence content from me. We're here at Freedom Park. I'm going to walk around the lake and talk to you about what it is, the background story of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. I am not actually going to read the recreated document in this video. You're going to hear a lot of it for the rest of the month. But I'm just going to tell you about the lore, the story that's been passed down in journals, in diaries, and in people's stories that they've been passing on to their kids throughout the year. So I don't know if you can tell, I am lit up with enthusiasm for this month. Let's go hike this lake and let's talk about the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence.
Before anyone in Philadelphia put quill to parchment, before the sound of the Liberty Bell rang out across a newborn country, and long before the date July 4th, 1776 would come to define an entire nation's identity, a different story was unfolding hundreds of miles south in a rough, fiercely independent patch of wilderness known as Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. This land, carved out from the woods and clay by settlers more accustomed to axes than to laws, was about to make a bold and perhaps reckless move, one that, even centuries later, remains both celebrated and questioned, legendary and shadowed by mystery. At the heart of this tale lies a document, a declaration, so incendiary that, if true, it would shift the honor of America's first cry of freedom away from the halls of Congress and into the humble courthouse of a frontier town called Charlottetown. This is not just the story of a piece of paper. It's the story of the people who may have written it, the world that forced their hand, and the long, winding path from rebellion to recognition that would see the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence rise, fall and rise again in the American imagination. To understand why a group of farmers and tradesmen might gather to declare independence from the British Crown more than a year before the rest of the colonies did, we have to begin in the world that they lived in. Life in colonial North Carolina, especially in the western Piedmont where Mecklenburg sat, was a mixture of hardship and promise. Unlike the bustling ports of Charleston or Boston, Charlotte was not a center of commerce. It was a village on the edge of civilization. Settlers here had to carve their lives from dense forest, raising cabins from logs, planting fields by hand, hunting game, hauling water, and defending themselves from threats both real and imagined. These weren't people who asked permission. They acted and then dealt with the consequences. Most of them were Scots-Irish immigrants, descendants of persecuted Presbyterians from the British Isles, who had come to the Americas in search of religious freedom, economic opportunity, and land to call their own. Fiercely independent, wary of centralized power, and deeply committed to the ideas of self-rule, these settlers had no love for distant kings and faraway laws. By the 1760s and early 1770s, the tension between the colonies and the British government was rising like steam from a boiling pot. Laws like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts weren't just about taxes, they were about control. Parliament wanted to remind the colonies who was in charge. But for the settlers in Mecklenburg, who already lived day to day with little reliance on or help from the crown, these laws felt not just unjust, but also absurd. Why should they, toiling in the wilderness, pay tribute to a monarch they had never seen, for wars they had not started, and for goods that they did not want? To them, the interference was not just unwelcome, it was tyranny, and they weren't alone. Throughout North Carolina, committees of safety began to spring up. Self-organized groups of local leaders who took it upon themselves to enforce boycotts, communicate revolutionary ideas, and quietly prepare for something more than resistance. They were preparing for a revolt. Still, most people weren't ready to break away from Britain entirely, not just yet. Even among revolution-minded colonists, the idea of full-blown independence felt dangerous, radical, and premature. That all changed in April of 1775 when British troops clashed with American militiamen at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. Though it took weeks for the news to reach the southern colonies, when it did, the impact was profound. In Mecklenburg, the arrival of the news was like lightning striking dry grass. The tension that had simmered for a decade now exploded into purpose. Here, in the courthouse square of Charlotte, leaders and citizens came together with one shared realization. The time for words was over. The time for action, uncompromising, irrevocable action, had arrived. On May 19, 1775, an urgent meeting was called. Delegates from every corner of Mecklenburg County, captains of the militia, prominent citizens, respected ministers, and ordinary farmers poured into the village square. Charlotte at this time was little more than a crossroads town, with dirt streets and log homes clustered around a simple two-story courthouse. But on that day, it was transformed into the epicenter of something extraordinary. Thousands are said to have gathered. Some walked miles on foot, others rode in wagons or came on horseback. Entire families came to witness what they suspected might be the beginning of something much larger than themselves. In the square, tensions ran high. Murmurs passed through the crowd like wind in tall grass. What would they decide? What would happen next? Would they actually go through with this? Inside, 27 men, some of the most trusted and respected leaders of the community gathered to deliberate. Among them were Colonel Thomas Polk, a seasoned soldier and politician whose leadership and fiery spirit helped to rally the people; John McNitt Alexander, a meticulous recorder and thinker tasked with keeping the minutes of the assembly; Abraham Alexander, who presided over the meeting with calm authority; Dr. Ephraim Brevard, a physician and scholar whose pen would give form to the words that echoed the growing fury of a people pushed too far; and William Kennon, who stood to give one of the most forceful arguments for severing ties with the British Crown. Each of the 27 represented different parts of the county, and while their backgrounds varied, some were planters, others blacksmiths, merchants, lawyers, doctors, or veterans, they were united in their belief that tyranny could no longer be tolerated. Their names, later memorialized on bronze tablets and granite monuments, were not chosen lightly. These were not reckless men chasing fame. They were guardians of their communities, some of them elders, many of them fathers, and all of them aware that what they were contemplating could cost them everything. And still, they came forward, stepped into history, and made a choice they believed would shape the future, not only of Mecklenburg County, but of the entire continent. The next morning, on May 20th, they met again. This time, the delegates went inside the courthouse and took their seats, while the people waited outside in the spring heat. The records of what was said inside that courthouse are few and incomplete, but what has survived, passed down through journals, letters, and oral history, tells us something remarkable. The men inside were not interested in half measures. They did not propose a list of grievances or request reform. What they drafted, allegedly by the hand of Dr. Ephraim Brevard, was something radical, an outright declaration that the authority of the king in North Carolina was no longer recognized. Government by British rule, they declared, had ceased to exist in their county, and in its place they created a new provisional government of their own. This was not a protest, it was a severance, a full-throated declaration of independence. The exact text of the Mecklenburg Declaration has been lost to history, at least the original document has. What survives is a version reconstructed years later from memory after the original was supposedly destroyed in a house fire. And that is where this story begins to shift from certainty to speculation. According to John McNitt Alexander, who served as secretary of the meeting and later tried to preserve its memory, the declaration was not only drafted and signed that day, it was sent by messenger to the North Carolina delegation and to the Continental Congress itself. Some accounts even claim that the document reached Philadelphia and inspired Thomas Jefferson's famous prose the following year. Others, including Jefferson himself, denied this fiercely. He called the Mecklenburg claims spurious, dismissing the idea that such a document had existed at all. Yet there are tantalizing pieces of evidence to the contrary. Letters, second-hand recollections, even a now-lost diary entry by a North Carolina officer present in 1775, all suggesting that something very real happened in Charlotte that May. What exactly did happen inside that courthouse? Who wrote this document and who signed it? Why was it not printed or preserved in the way other foundational texts were? These questions have haunted historians for centuries. Some believe the May 20th Declaration was real, but that it was quickly overshadowed by the more structured and widely accepted Mecklenburg Resolves document, adopted 11 days later on May 31st, 1775. This included resolutions that laid out a detailed framework for self-government, but stopped just short of explicitly declaring full independence. Others argue that the May 20th document was entirely a myth, constructed in hindsight to give North Carolina a larger role in the founding of our nation. Still others contend that it was real, but intentionally buried, too radical at the time, and therefore set aside until the climate of revolution caught up with it. What is undeniable is this: on May 20th, 1775, something profound occurred in Mecklenburg County. Whether it was a full Declaration of Independence or a dramatic series of resolutions misremembered, the people of Charlotte were among the first Americans to declare they would no longer live under British rule. They put their lives, their property, and their families at risk for the ideas of self-governance. And they did so not with fanfare or the approval of the Continental Congress, but in a small town, in a humble courthouse, on a warm May morning, because they believed it was right. History often clings to its most convenient versions of the truth, the ones easily packaged, stamped with a famous name, and taught in neat lines across the pages of school books. But real history is far more complicated. It's fragmented and tangled, scattered through letters, journals, lost documents, and the fading recollections of old men sitting by firelight. Such is the case with the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. No known original copy of the document has survived. What we do have is a reconstruction, pieced together years later from the memory of John McNitt Alexander and a handful of others who have attended the meeting. And yet, even in its secondhand form, the words strike with startling clarity, defiance, and eloquence. If this document did exist as described, it would predate the declaration signed in Philadelphia by more than a year, and claim for North Carolina the first official call for independence in American history. According to the reconstructed version, the Declaration opened with a sweeping statement that all laws derived from royal authority were henceforth null and void in Mecklenburg County. No man, it said, had the right to exercise power over the people unless chosen by the people themselves. Government, they insisted, existed only by the consent of the governed, a revolutionary concept for its time. The Crown, they declared, had wantonly trampled on our rights and liberties and had forfeited all claims to authority. In place of British rule, they formed a provisional local government empowered by the free will of the citizenry. It was, in effect, a sovereign break, not a call for negotiation or reform, but a full and unequivocal severance. No loyalty to King George, no allegiance to Parliament, only to liberty, law, and each other. These were not cautious words. They were revolutionary, bold enough to be called treason. The language of the Mecklenburg Declaration, if we take it as authentic, bears a striking resemblance to the Declaration of Independence, penned by Thomas Jefferson more than a year later. Phrases like free and independent and the authority of the king or parliament is annulled and vacated echo closely the themes that Jefferson would famously articulate in 1776. This has led to centuries of speculation and not a little bit of controversy. Did Jefferson borrow from the Mecklenburg Declaration? Did the text reach him in Philadelphia, influencing the shape of America's founding words? Or were the similarities simply the natural result of a shared intellectual current, of enlightenmental ideas flowing freely among men of liberty across the colonies? Some defenders of the Mecklenburg Declaration believe that Jefferson's ideas were not original, but inspired, perhaps even directly, by the fiery words from Charlotte. Others, including Jefferson himself, bristled at that suggestion. In fact, when word of the Declaration resurfaced in 1819, Jefferson dismissed it as a fabrication, calling the text a likely confusion with the later Mecklenburg Resolves document of May 31, 1775. These resolves were printed at the time, and their survival in the historical record is not disputed. But they do not go as far as the alleged May 20th Declaration. The resolves, while radical, still left some doors open to reconciliation. The May 20th Declaration, if real, slammed that door shut. It wasn't reform, it was revolution. To understand the controversy, one must look at how and when the reconstructed text came to light. Decades after the events of 1775, John McNick Alexander, now aged and reflective, attempted to recreate the text from memory. The original document, he said, had been lost in a fire. But he still had his notes, he claimed, fragments, names, impressions. With the help of his son and others who had been present at the original meeting, he reconstructed what he believed the Declaration had said. This version was later endorsed by prominent figures in North Carolina, including Governor William Davidson and U.S. Senator Nathaniel Macon. For many in the state, the Declaration was more than a lost piece of parchment. It was a badge of honor, a proud claim that North Carolina had been the first to rise, the first to declare, and the first to stand. Yet, the absence of the original document and the long delay in its publication has kept the matter in debate. Skeptics argue that memory is fallible, especially when clouded by time and patriotism. They point out that no one outside of North Carolina seemed to reference such a document at the time, not in Philadelphia, not in Virginia, not even among North Carolina's own delegation to the Continental Congress. If the Mecklenburg Declaration had truly been sent abroad and celebrated in 1775, why was it not printed in the newspapers, copied by other counties, or preserved in official congressional records? These are fair questions, and they form the heart of what historians call the Mecklenburg controversy. But historical truth is not always confined to what survives in ink and paper. It lives also in what people remember, what they swore they saw, and what they passed down. And here, the testimonies of those present take on a solemn weight. Reverend Humphrey Hunter, who had fought in the Revolution and lived in Mecklenburg, wrote in 1831 that he clearly recalled the Declaration being read aloud from the courthouse steps. Captain James Jack, a local tavern owner and patriot, claimed to have carried a copy of the Mecklenburg Declaration to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, delivering it personally to North Carolina's delegation. Though no surviving records confirm his reception, Jack's testimony was given late in life with no apparent motive for fabrication. Others, like Hezekiah Alexander and William Kennon, spoke openly in their later years about what they heard, saw, and helped create on those days in May 1775. The consistency of their memories, decades apart, suggests not invention, but reverence. It's also worth noting that in 1819, when the reconstructed text was finally published, it caused an immediate and thunderous reaction. Newspapers across the young United States printed it, celebrated it, debated it. North Carolinians proudly emblazoned the date May 20th, 1775 on their state seal and later on their state flag, placing it forever in the symbolic heart of their identity. In the eyes of many, this act wasn't about competing with Philadelphia, but about honoring the courage of a forgotten community that had dared to speak first. The backlash from Jefferson and others in the national spotlight didn't stop the pride in North Carolina from growing. To this day, Charlotte holds annual May 20th celebrations. The streets and schools are named for the men who gathered in that courthouse. A bronze statue of Captain Jack carrying the Declaration stands tall in uptown Charlotte, a sentinel to a legacy both triumphant and disputed. Perhaps the most fascinating legend of the Mecklenburg Declaration is not whether it was real in the way we understand historical fact, but that it became real through memory, belief, and tradition. The people of Mecklenburg believed in what they had done. They taught it to their children, inscribed it on monuments, and carried it in their hearts as evidence that liberty had lived first in their soil. And in that sense, it may not matter whether the parchment survived. What matters is that the idea did. And that idea, that people can meet, speak freely, and declare themselves free of tyranny, has a power all on its own. At the heart of the story is a deeper truth. Revolution is not always born in great chambers or under the glow of chandeliers. Sometimes it starts in a dusty courthouse, in the voice of a country doctor, or in the hand of a blacksmith setting down his tools to take up a pen. The men of Mecklenburg County were not elite philosophers or political celebrities. They were frontier folk living on the edge of an empire. But they had seen enough, and in their conviction, their courage, and their willingness to risk everything, they may have lit a fire that helped to spread across the 13 colonies. Whether or not their words directly shaped Jefferson's pen, their spirit helped shape the character of a revolution. Today, as historians continue to debate the authenticity of the Mecklenburg Declaration, its legend continues to stir pride and curiosity. And maybe that's what it was always meant to do. Not to eclipse July 4th, not to rewrite the story of American independence, but to remind us that freedom was never a single moment. It was a mosaic built from many voices, many risks, many declarations. And in one corner of that mosaic, shining proudly beneath the Carolina sky, is a small courthouse where 27 brave men once stood and said, "No more."
Guys, in case you can't tell, I am lit up with enthusiasm for May, for all the things that are happening in May, for my country, for my state, how proud I am This is the 250th anniversary of, in my opinion, one of the most significant things that happened in colonial history. I'm so proud to be from North Carolina. I'm so proud of our heritage. I'm so proud of our document. I'm so proud that we were first in freedom. It's on our license plate. I hope you enjoy all the videos that I'm working on this month. I've already done a few of them, and I'm just getting more and more excited as I go. I cannot wait to show you everything that's in Charlotte to memorialize the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. What we have left, we have some tombstones, we have some markers, monuments, things around town. We're going to give one day to every signer of the Mecklenburg Declaration from here till the end of May. So that's what Memorial May is going to be all about this year. I hope you come along for the ride. If you love history like me, if you love the Revolutionary War or colonial American history, this is my time to shine. I'm really excited to bring it all to you live from North Carolina. We're going to celebrate the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence together. I cannot wait. I hope you're along for the ride. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.